I'd like to welcome everyone to the 2014 SU Research Day and Innovation Showcase. I'm Clifton Griffin, Dean of Grad Studies and Research. First and foremost, thank all of you for being here. In particular, I'd like to thank our Provost, Dr. Allen, sitting back here for her support for this event and for research and scholarship overall. This day is about creating connections. Those connections are important, whether it's faculty member to faculty member right here on campus, or it's creating connections between our campus and the outside community. That's what we hope will be the takeaway message from your presentations today. We have Dr. Jill Caviglia Harris, who will talk to us about the Amazonian dilemma. Jill?
Okay, thank you. I'm here to talk to you about the Amazonian dilemma. So the Amazon contains 50 to 80% of the world's land species, the largest river system on Earth, and an enormous stock of carbon. The question I'm here to address with you today is, can Brazil maintain this globally important resource while the nation develops? So you could address this question a lot of different ways. One would be to analyze census data, review the works of other people, or you could collect your own data from the Amazonian people that are making decisions that impact this region of the world. It's that last approach that I've taken over the last 20 years. I collect survey data from Amazonian residents and merge this data with locational information that's put together in geographic information systems, and merged with remote sensing data, or satellite images that are classified to distinctify between different land cover classes, like forest and pasture. So this work is a bit challenging. We work with undergraduate, graduate, and postdoctoral students that we prepare for the work, but we never seem to be able to adequately get across just what they're about to encounter. So this is Simon. We worked with him for about a year, getting him ready for this research. He learned 5 different computer languages so that he could have worked with our survey. He took language courses and cultural courses, and he also attended workshops that other students that had worked with us previously attended and gave him the, quote, inside information on what to expect. But I'll never forget the day that we arrived at our research location and our headquarters. After a 26-hour series of flights and a 4-hour drive down to the area, Simon turns to me and says, "I want to go home." It's so dry and so far from the ocean. And so you can understand why he's saying that. Although we told him what to be ready for, he's going to the Amazon and he's expecting to see this. And this is what he got. So there's Katrina, who put together our database, used our maps extensively while doing this, and was still surprised at how enormous the properties are and just how large and massive our survey region is, which is larger than the state of Delaware. Or Michael, who was just so surprised at the fact that the region really looked like the American West, from the ranch landscape to the cowboys and the rodeos we attended. Then there's the roads. You can show people images of this, but you're never quite prepared for going over a road that's made of logs until you're there, driving up embankments sideways with cars, which I've done, or the large number of hours that you have to spend trying to keep these cars working for you. So I'll never forget the day that one of our surveyors that was out in the field for the entire time came back and handed me this steel skid plate that, if you can tell, is bended in half. And she was so proud because she'd been stuck on a boulder and managed to get the car off and get it back to us. It just came back in pieces. And then there's this story about a trip back from the capital of our state. We were coming down this highway. It was the only road that was paved at that time period. And we're coming back and collecting GPS points on the way. We figured, you can always get better data. So that's the GPS on top of the car. Wait. Okay. And on bottom, I don't know if you noticed, there's like something that's round on the bottom. That's the magnet that holds it together on top of the car. A magnet that's so strong that a student once said that it could probably take down a plane. So we were coming down that road, and after spending a very long day with Brazilian officials and trying to get information and data from them, we were successful, but a little bit pudgy coming home. And we decided to have a bet of how long it would take us to get there. Well, Dan, the geographer on our team, was driving, and he had the quickest, closest time. So he had the ability to step on the gas and promise us that we would get there by sunset. But the only thing is he forgot about how precarious these roads can be. 10 minutes later, hit a very large pothole, hit it so hard that the people in the back of the car hit the ceiling of the car, and the GPS went flying. It not only went to the other side of the road, but it made it all the way over to the other embankment. He lost the bet. And he had to duct tape the GPS to the car for the remainder of our time. Okay, so back to our research question. Can Brazil maintain this globally important resource while the nation develops? Well, in 1970, Brazil had the highest income inequality in the world, was ranked 103rd, the 103rd wealthiest nation, and had 55%, more than half of their population, living below the poverty line. So I'd like you to imagine that you are one of those households, one of those members that lives below the poverty line. And what if the government told you, someone that didn't have any land, didn't have a job, and didn't have many prospects, that they were going to offer you a new opportunity? They would give you free land in the Amazon. All you needed to do was get on the bus. How many of you think you'd take that opportunity? A lot of you. You'd have to be adventurous. You'd have to be probably a little insane. Living in the Amazon's not an easy thing. But you'd probably also have to be a little bit desperate. So fast forward 44 years. Brazil now has some of the lowest income inequality in its history. Is the 7th wealthiest nation in the world, and has only 21% of the population living below the poverty line, a level that's on par with the US. At the same time as the nation's been developing, the nation has also been deforesting. What I want you to notice here is what's called the arc of deforestation. So most of the deforestation that's been happening is happening along the outer edge, or this brown arc of the Amazon. So the brown municipalities are those that have very high levels of deforestation. The green ones are those with a lot of forest intact, or almost all of their forest intact. So what we have here is government policy that has led to settlements, and settlements that have led to a lot of extensive amounts of deforestation. And at the same time, Amazonians have not yet caught up to the rest of the nation. They earn 21% compared to the rest of the nation, 21% less. And 35% of Amazonian households still live below the poverty line, in comparison to 21% for the average house for the other parts of the country. So what policymakers struggle with now is this question: should policy to reduce deforestation include measures that simultaneously address poverty? In other words, does a win-win solution exist? I'll be addressing this question with 3 types of research that I've been involved in. First, research on what's called sustainable agriculture, planning and deforestation, and I'll end with deforestation and development. So first, sustainable agriculture. Does a win-win solution exist? The idea is that it possibly can with the use of sustainable agriculture. Now, this would include the harvesting of crops that are native or indigenous to the area. It comes in 2 different forms. The use of agroforestry, which means that you would plant fruit-bearing trees in rows, and in between these, you plant shade-tolerant crops like coffee and cacao. You get a harvest from both of them, and you don't need to clear the forest. These methods are often combined with the harvesting of fish, honey, and non-timber forest products, all of which depend on a standing forest and not deforestation, in stark contrast to the expansive amounts of pasture and cattle that you see throughout the rest of the area. Okay, so what we found is that deforestation is actually significantly lower for households that use these methods. The first thing that you see here is the mean property size, 75 hectares. A little bit more than 180 acres is how large these properties are. And what we find is that farmers that have used sustainable methods over the time that we've been watching them or studying them have increased their deforestation from 25 to about 45 hectares. At the same time, the households that don't practice these methods have increased their deforestation to almost the entire property, about 72 hectares. So it's farmers like Antonio Carlos that use these methods. And as a result, farmers like him have significantly greater amounts of forest. Antonio Carlos has about 60% more forest on his property than the average household, and owns about half the cattle herd. But nowhere else are these differences more remarkable than when you sit down to eat with him. Antonio Carlos will have on his dinner table rice and beans and beef like any other farmer in the area. But on top of that, you'll always find that he has fruits and fruit juices from his property, and he has vegetables from his garden. And he almost always has something fresh, like the fish that was caught that very same day that we ate it. But what we found is that the income of these households that use sustainable methods is actually significantly lower. Farmers that use these methods have lower average incomes than those that don't. So we don't think that this method of agriculture is your win-win. By 2009, only 0.5% of the population was using these methods. And of those that were using them, they were making significantly less. So planning, maybe that's our answer. Can planning be used to discourage deforestation? Okay, what you see here is a property map that's overlaid with satellite image. So the property map are the grids that you see. This is the original planning that was used in the Amazon. The properties were laid out along a grid-like pattern. Households were given about 100 hectares, or 240 acres. The satellite image that you've seen is primarily two colors. Green is forest, and the tan and yellow is deforestation. And what they found is that households typically deforested from the front of their properties to the back. So what you see around that yellow, you see that straight line? That's the road, so that's the property front. And what happens over time is that property front, the area from the property front, gets extended and deforestation continues from the front to the back, and by 2009, the properties were almost completely deforested. So the government experimented with a lot of different property designs. I'm going to show you one other. In this one, they distributed properties along the riverways. They didn't go straight through them. And they gave out properties that were about half that size, thinking that if farmers didn't have so much to deforest, maybe they'd deforest less. So we took a look at these properties and a lot of other property designs, and we found, though, that the pattern of deforestation didn't change. They would deforest from the front to the back, and by 2009, it's just about gone. So independent of the design of the planning, the design of the property map, we found that households instead followed this type of pattern that was all driven by the age of the property. The younger the property, the more deforestation per year. The older the property, the less deforestation per year. So households would get there, deforest a great amount in the first time period, getting their pasture established, and after that, as there's little forest left, the amount that's being cleared per year declines. Okay, finally, my last topic, deforestation and development. The question here is, does wealth lead to deforestation, or does deforestation lead to wealth? I know that they're correlated. When wealth goes up, deforestation goes up. When deforestation goes down, wealth goes down. But what I don't know is what is the causation here. So what we were able to do, because we have longitudinal or time series data, is tease out the effects and control for different things and determine causation. And what we learned is that deforestation is not directly linked to wealth or what you're storing in your banks. It's directly linked to income, and that income is invested into wealth. And that wealth comes in the form of appliances, farm equipment, and education. And then this pattern didn't end there. It was a cyclical pattern. That wealth was reinvested into more deforestation. So what this translated into was that 1 hectare of cleared forest was about the equivalent of increasing income about $70 per year, or $700 in 10 years, or one property could be translated into $52,000 additional dollars in 10 years. Now, maybe dividing that over years and dividing that over household members isn't that much. But really what this translates into is 2 more children going to school, purchasing a car, or paying off medical expenses. So what we found was a direct link between deforestation and wealth, and also what we call well-being. But the question is, does it have to be that way? Is deforestation the only way to growth? So in this study, we did just that. We studied growth and development as measured by what's called the HDI, the Human Development Index. So the Human Development Index is an index that includes income, health, and literacy. So all of those 3 things are combined into this one index. And what you're looking at now is a map of the entire country of Brazil. And each municipality is color-coded according to the growth in HDI. And what I want you to notice is that they're all blue. That means there's growth between 2000 and 2010 and development between those years in every single municipality. What I also want you to notice is that the darker the color, the greater the growth. And to give you some context, this is Rio and São Paulo, the 2 cities that you're probably most familiar with from Brazil. This is where Brasilia is located, the capital of the country, and this is the Amazon. So what's most important to note here is that the Amazonian welfare is increasing at a quicker rate. So you notice that there's more darker colors in the Amazon compared to the rest of the country. And most important, those darker areas, the most recent growth that we're seeing in the Amazon is not only occurring in the arc of deforestation, it's occurring throughout the entire Amazon. Okay, so going back to where I started, sustainable agriculture is unlikely to be your win-win. Planning and deforestation is unlikely to make a difference in deforestation rates. And when it comes to deforestation and development, deforestation has reduced poverty. But what we've learned is it's not the only way. So the big question, is there this win-win? Our answer is no, there actually isn't. Instead, what we think should happen is that instead of isolating some places for development and preservation, we should separate those 2 things. So what you're looking at here is a map of the Brazilian Amazon and the extensive conservation program that's out there right now. So the red is deforestation, but the green areas and the yellow areas are areas that are protected or in conservation units. Right now, 44% of the Amazon is currently protected. What we'd like to see happen is something like 70% of the Amazon being protected. But not take all of the areas that haven't yet been designated as protection as protected areas. Instead, focus the protected areas into targeted areas that would be best for protection and targeted areas that would be best for development. So I'd like to stop thinking about this statement as the truth, that sustainable development is a win-win, and start getting people to think about sustainable development as a facade, at least in this area. It's window dressing that makes developers feel good and environmentalists feel good. Sometimes it's better to do something than nothing, but many times it's actually not better to do something than nothing. Okay, go back to Antonio Carlos. Yes, He's an environmentalist at heart, and he wants to leave forests to his children and his grandchildren. But if you take a look at this Google image of his property, it's absolutely clear that that is what he's doing. There's that 67% of his property that's in forest. But when you zoom out, you notice that he's practically alone. The only areas within the state of Rondonia that are green are protected. But if you zoom out further, there's so much of the Amazon that's left intact forest. So our solution is coming up with what we call a preservation potential index. Identify an index that you can use to figure out what areas are best for development and what areas are best for preservation. You can include things like property values, household incomes, soils, and road networks. So what we're talking about here is not a place-based win-win, but what we like to think of as a win-win for Brazil. So if you'd like to learn more about this, a couple of things to look for. The Center for International Forestry. They're an organization that's doing field experiments and work to identify the best policies for the best locations. Mongo Bay is probably the best source of deforestation data that you can find, and Amazon, a think tank in the Brazilian Amazon that merges remote sensing data with data that's collected in the field from the people that are actually the actors and agents. But I'd like you to leave you with this. When I asked my students what they took from this and what they most remembered, it was things like this that they said, and it was uncanny about how many of them, it was actually absolutely all of them, responded that what they took away from this most was the people. The people made an impression with their hospitality. You could count on a few things at almost every interview. You were going to get a tour, you would drink some coffee, and you were probably going to leave with fresh produce. And if you were lucky, they would lend you a machete and let you cut it down yourself. They were uncomfortably generous and made me feel welcome, even though I only knew a few words of Portuguese. So it was farmers like this one that knew that Michael had a very long way to collect the data points he needed to on a very large coffee plantation. He said, hop on. I'll take you where you need to go. Just tell me where you need me to stop. Or the teacher and these students that fed Dan and Michael lunch. Because when they asked where the closest restaurant was, they had to answer that there was none close enough to get there during the lunch hour. Or the hundreds of farmers that never let you leave without something in your hands. So I'll tell you a secret if I can get it out. It might be this research question that motivates us, but it's the kindness and generosity of these people and their incredible stories that keep us coming back. Thank you.